I love being here today for our 23rd year of celebrating Children's Sabbath with your beautiful new pastor. We call you Reverend Dr. Amy. And this is a church that has meant so much to me over the years, and the spirits that hover over you. Bill Coffin was very important in my life. He took in a poor law student and let me live with him for a year and stayed with me as a dear friend and mentor for many, many years. And Jim Forbes has been a member of the Children's Defense Fund Board for many years and been one of the great preachers that has kept us going in very tough times. And thank you for letting me come and celebrate this with you. And children, the music was wonderful, and those of you who work with children, thank you very much. Dr. King said that America is going to go to hell if we don't use her vast resources and poverty to end poverty and make it possible for all of God's children to have the basic necessities of life. The prophet Jeremiah speaks as I would if I were a prophet and said, "They have become great and rich. They have grown fat and sleek. They judge not with justice the cause of their fatherless. They do not defend the rights of the needy." I wonder what God must think of us, whom we Christians believe came into history as a poor baby, when he hears the realities of children's lives in the United States of America, which is the largest economy in the world. And yet we let a child be born into poverty every 36 seconds, into extreme poverty every 69 seconds. Our children are the poorest age group in America, and the younger they are, the poorer they are. 1 in 3 children who are in the preschool years is poor, and the black child is the poorest child in America. What must God think about what we are doing, and where is our voice? A public school student is suspended every 2 seconds. And disproportionately, they are young black children, mainly black males. I can't figure out what a 4-year-old could do that would result in them being suspended or expelled from schools. I think we adults have lost our minds. We have got to stop zero-tolerance school discipline policies, which is feeding children into the juvenile justice system, which feeds children into the criminal justice system, and we have got to break up mass incarceration, which is becoming the new American apartheid. We don't need to redo the Civil War and go back through a second post-Reconstruction era. We need to wake up, and we need to focus on our children and what is happening in the growing gap between rich and poor. A child is arrested every 24 seconds in our nation. A public school student is corporally punished every 30 seconds. Now, we've technically outlawed corporal punishment in prisons, but we still permit it in many states in our public schools, and we wonder why we have a culture of violence in solving disputes. It's time for restorative justice and to outlaw corporal punishment in all of our schools. A child is confirmed abused or neglected every 47 seconds. A child is killed or a teen is killed by firearms every 3 hours and 16 minutes, and a child and youth is injured by a gun every half hour. The culture of violence in this country is unparalleled in the rest of the world. American children are 17 times more likely to die from gun violence, and we have normalized violence. The country was founded on violence. The dream was right, but it was built in its application on Native American genocide, on slavery, on exclusion of all women from the electoral process, and exclusion of all non-propertied men of all colors. We need to begin to work again to close that gap and to stop the backward slide toward the old apartheid. Wake up so that our children inherit a better country than we did, but they are sliding backwards, and where is our voice after a transforming civil rights movement to let our children go backwards? We can do better as adults. A child is killed by abuse or neglect every 5.5 hours. and we have got to deal with this. Violence in our culture, violence in our homes, violence on our streets. Children are terrified. There are many living in post-traumatic stress syndrome conditions in our homes and neighborhoods and in our schools, and none of us is exempt. Black children are disproportionately likely to be victims of gunfire at the hands of many, but nobody is safe, as Sandy Hook and others should show us. When are we going to stop the culture of violence in this country? And when are we going to stop normalizing violence? It runs me wild. I don't go to Walmart. I've been in there once. But to go in and think after you see the toasters and the kitchenware and the fishing poles, you run into a place where there's the high-impact ammunition that mowed those children down and the AK-47s. Stop supporting violence. We have got to denormalize violence and outlaw those people who push it and that keep getting our children killed and staying terrified. Now, these are not acts of God. We know what we can do. And I just want to mention the cradle to prison pipeline before I get on to how we can build that next transforming movement that we're going to have to do now with urgency and persistence to save our children, save our country, and save our souls. I can't imagine, again, what God must think of us every day when I see these figures and see the children behind these figures. I do hope that we can begin to deal with the fact that every child has a right to a quality education in our country. The greatest threat to America's security, the greatest threat to our military, the greatest threat to our economic security doesn't come, as I say over and over again, from any external enemy. It comes from our failure to invest in and educate our children. What in the world is the matter with us? That 6% of all of our children, all racial and income groups, cannot read at grade level in 4th or 8th grade. That over 75% of our Latino children cannot read or compute at grade level. And over 80% of our black children cannot read or compute at grade level. How can the most powerful nation and the richest nation on earth let its children grow up in ignorance? And if you don't have an education in this globalizing competitive world, you're being sentenced to social and economic death. And we have got to find our voice and to stop this. A black boy has got a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison in his lifetime if he was born in 2001. A Latino boy, a 1 in 6 chance. And we have to go to prison in his lifetime, and this cradle to prison pipeline, which is trapping so many millions of our children, has got to be seen and called out and changed. And we've got to reroute these children to college and to productive work and to hope in the richest nation on earth that pretends to be democratic and pretends to be fair and pretends to have a level playing field for children, but it won't happen if we remain silent and don't continue the next phase of the civil rights movement that came at such sacrifice to put the economic and social underpinnings beneath those political and civil rights which themselves are under threat. And anybody who does not get out and vote and hold their leaders accountable, that is a vote, and you're letting other people make a decision for your future and for our country's future. So let's get it together. Now, doing something about this is not rocket science. We know what to do. And there are many books, and we've published hundreds of books about what we can do. We know how to end child poverty tomorrow, and it's not about what we don't know. And the research has come a long way over the last 40 years. But it's about, again, will and values, not about money. Every poor child in America could be lifted out of poverty and extreme poverty, and with the revenue we would save by just closing corporate tax loopholes that allow U.S. corporations to dodge or avoid $90 billion in federal income taxes each year by shifting profits to subsidiaries and tax havens. Who should have first call on our national resources? I wouldn't begrudge anybody their first or second billion, maybe, if there were no poor children, if there were no hungry children, if there were not 1 million homeless children, if there were not 1.1 million children, households with no cash income, with millions of children. We can do better, and we must have a concept of enough for those at the top, or a concept of justice and balance in using our public revenue. We could more than 17,500 poor children could enroll in Head Start for a year for the cost of just one F-35 fighter jet among the 2,400 the Department of Defense is scheduled to buy, despite a 42% cost overrun and the jet's numerous technical failures. I hear people debating about whether Head Start's successful. You should compare it to the F-35. We've got the research and we know what works. And we could provide an extra meal every day to every hungry child in America by closing the tax breaks for corporate meals and entertainment that allow U.S. corporations to avoid $14 billion in federal income taxes every year. We're coming out with a new report on child poverty and how we could end that child poverty or significantly decrease it within existing programs, and we could do it without a whole lot of stuff. And we keep saying, well, we don't have the money. We have the money. We just don't have the will and the values, and we don't have our voice demanding it. And I want to keep coming back to us and what we can do. The richest 1% of Americans, as you know, own more of the nation's wealth than the bottom 90%. In 2013, just the highest paid one American CEO made more money than 2,520 elementary school teachers, or 4,620 Head Start teachers, or 6,600 child care workers, at a time when mothers are struggling to work and children are being left in substandard care, and with sometimes just all alone. We can do better than that. We don't have a money problem. We have a values problem. We have a priorities problem. We have a voice problem, and that's something that you and I can cure. We've got to have a new movement. Now, I talk about Noah's Arks and the lessons from that everywhere I go that an anonymous sage warned us about, and I want to repeat or share them again this morning. The first is don't miss the boat. Which is the first lesson from Noah's Ark. And the United States is really going to miss the boat to the future and heaven for those of us who believe in it. And in our globalizing world, if we don't put our children first and invest in ending the poverty that is ravishing so many lives. The second lesson from Noah's Ark, this anonymous sage told us to remember that we're all in the same boat. We may not like these poor Black and Latino children, but they're already a majority of our twos and unders and will be a majority of all of our public school children. If 60% of all of them can, almost 80% of the Black and Latino children can't read, 75 to 80% can't read, what are we going to do for a strong economy in the future? Just put them into a prison system which fuels more incarceration? States are spending already over 2 to 3 times more per prisoner than for public school pupil. That's about the dumbest investment policy I can think of. We should stop investing in prisons and investing in education. 74% of all of our 16 to 24-year-olds cannot get into the military because of health problems that have been untreated, because of illiteracy problems, or because of prior incarceration. What does this say about our common sense and our economic success? The third lesson, which I repeat from this anonymous sage, is plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. We are in a quick fix, profit-driven culture that cannot understand that tomorrow and the future is in the bodies and minds and spirits of our children today. We must all act with urgency to prepare every one of them for the future. The fourth lesson, which is don't be afraid of getting out of the box and be afraid of criticism. We all want to be liked. We're not running as Christians for homecoming queen. We really need to get out of the box and speak up. If you don't want to be criticized, don't say anything, don't be anything, don't do anything. It's time for us now to do what our forebears did to transform the years and decades of apartheid through a transforming civil rights movement that transformed the country, but we're going to see it go back and lose it if we don't begin to create that same spirit of courage. My favorite lesson, among the many lessons that remain, is remember that the Ark was built by amateurs and the Titanic by professionals. We keep waiting for the great leader to come back. We keep relying on the politicians who are responders, not creators, to do our own job as citizens and as parents and as people who care, people of faith. And so let's don't wait around. Dr. King's not coming back, as I say over and over again. And Dr. King didn't start a single movement. He responded to the movement of others from the community. And you go back and look at it, and he was able to encapsulate our dreams. But it is time for us to get out there and build the movement for our children that we have to do if we're going to save our future and save our souls. So what other things should we think about as we celebrate this Children's Sabbath? First, like Dr. King, live by conviction and not by conformity. He's talked about the need, as I repeat over and over again, that we should stop having thermometer leaders and being thermometer leaders. We've all got to be thermostat leaders who set the temperature and set the climate. And if enough of us raise our voices and say children first, education before military preparedness, whatever that means, I think that we could begin to change the climate of the nation, the priorities of the nation. I hope that we will also begin to understand and be patient and stick with things. I mean, everybody wants to sprint or hold a press conference or think something instant is going to happen. It isn't. The playwright Bertolt Brecht used to say, there are those who go good for a day, and they are good, and who work for a day. There are those who work for a week, and they are better. But then there are those who work for a lifetime for justice and for better things and for change. And they are the indispensable ones. And we need all to become indispensable ones. And we have seen some extraordinary changes. Hundreds of new laws are on the book, and I'm particularly pleased by the 30 or 40 major new laws on the book over the last 40 years since CDF started that have given millions of children a head start. They've given millions of children health care. We now have 95% access of children to health care, but we've got to go and do a Medicare system for children just like we have for the seniors. We cannot fight Mississippi and, who's different from Massachusetts. These are children of our nation, and every child ought to be born with the health care that they need and have access to that throughout their lives. And we need your help in making sure that we get CHIP reauthorized and refunded this year, so that we don't lose those 8.5 million children who are benefiting from that very important program. Go to our website and see what you can do to ensure that the progress that we've made in healthcare and in so many other areas, don't get eroded. We also need to do what every other competitive industrialized country does and put into place a high-quality early childhood system from zero, in fact, from before birth, through I say kindergarten. In the years of the greatest brain development, many of our children are coming to school not really knowing their real name. There's a study that by Hart and Reesley, researchers out in Kansas City, that said that by age 3, there was already a 30 million word interaction gap between the children in families, poor families, and the children of more affluent parents. We're now talking about Common Core standards. Now I'm for raising the standards for our children, but I am not for raising those standards unless we're going to put into place the means for children to achieve those standards. And that is a high-quality early childhood system for every child, and it needs to be universal pre-K and universal kindergarten, because only 14 states now have that. I hope you will work with us in putting this bedrock foundation so that children can start first grade ready to learn. And I hope that we will encourage more young people and older people and retired teachers to find their role in teaching children. Teaching is the most important profession after parenting and after being honest faith leaders. And we need to get bad teachers out of the classroom. We need to reward and recognize good teachers. But educators are very much the ones we're going to. And I was so pleased that I kept all 3 of my sons out of law school. I don't think we need a whole lot more lawyers. We need a whole lot more principals and people who are going to work and serve in community. And so let's figure out how we can get that early childhood system in place. The president has proposed a $90 billion 10-year investment in something called Strong Start that would provide for home visiting through pre-K. But I hope we're going to get it. We'll stay with it for years. It's not going to kind of move now, because anything that's called Obama is not going to move, but we can move it. after he's gone or while he's gone, if we build the firestorm from the community, from the faith congregations, to get our children ready for school. People say $90 billion is ridiculous. Well, we've talked about tax cuts. We don't, again, it's not a money problem. It's a will and a values problem, and our children should come first. I hope, fourth, that we will understand that there's a big difference between charity and justice. The mandate of the prophets is justice. You've read it this morning. You see what they all say. And I think that, it's very clear that we've got to go beyond that. All of the charity in the world, which I feel very strongly about, we should do, and reach out to the hungry and reach out to the homeless, but that cannot substitute for a just system where public resources are equally provided to those in need as to those who are not in need. I also hope, finally, that we as adults of every race and every income group will break our silence about the pervasive breakdown of moral and family and community values, place our children first in our lives, and struggle to model the behavior we want our children to learn. We do not have a child and youth problem in America. We have a profound adult problem in America. And we adults need to get it together. What must our children think as they see the crime and greed reflected in the examples of corporate leaders arrested and being investigated for pillaging their corporations and the lifeblood of their workers and pensioners? What must they think as they see our political leaders repeatedly say one thing and do another? What dare they believe when they see some religious leaders entrusted by faith to protect them, abuse them instead? I think it's time for a huge adult audit to look at our adult hypocrisy, because our children don't do what we tell them to do, but they always do what we do. And we must be mindful as parents and as faith leaders. And I just hope that we will begin to think about our priorities, to turn off the television set and that computer and sit down and read and have a meal and have rituals in our families with our children, because that's the way they learn what it means to be a member of a family. And I hope that they will see us and go out with us as we serve the children in need in our community, and know that they grow up with that, and that will become one of their expectations. We are shaping the values and the future of our communities and of our nation, and we're showing them what people of faith believe in by what we do, not by what we say. And I hope that we will not be afraid to let God just use us. When I think back, and I want to give up about every day, when I think back to who God used to transform so many things in history, I think maybe we can struggle to just say, just use me, all the sinfulness that I am and all the weakness that I am. Look what he did in sending one of my favorites. I'll just go with my favorites first. Moses' mother, Jochebed, and Moses' sister, Miriam, and Pharaoh's daughter, and two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, were told that they should kill all boy Hebrew babies. They did not. And through these women who refused to obey the Pharaoh because they feared God more, they saved this baby boy Moses, who transformed history. And then God used this boy Moses as his spokespeople to the Jewish people, but they also used him as a stutterer, as his spokesperson to Pharaoh. But when I think back at the courage of these role models, of these women and ordinary people, in rescuing one boy baby, and they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, why can't we stand up to the politicians today who are cutting the safety net programs and are not responding to protect our teachers? Look at what little David did. He was courageous, he was strategic in using a slingshot and knowing that people bogged down in all this armor and all this military wear couldn't sort of move quickly. But people use a boy like that. If he could make people more numerous than we can count through Abraham at 100, maybe he can use all of us over 70, and begin with grandparents who vote and who have a lot of clout and may have extra time to really reach out and save the next generation of our children. Let's think about how we, in all of our weakness, can become a part of building the transforming movement that our children need, and we can make a difference. And that is what the call is to us as people of faith. Let me end with a prayer to the God of all children, since our theme this year is that every child is precious in God's sight, and I get to change the words and the countries of need every year. But it's a prayer to the God of all children. God did not make two classes of children, and we should not let our country continue to make two classes of children. I have a few specific asks of Riverside. I hope next year we're going to have a freedom school at Riverside so that children can get off the street in the summer. I went out in the streets after Dr. King was assassinated into the public schools because children were looting. And I went into one public school and told them not to loot and ruin their future. And a 12-year-old looked me straight in the eye, a little boy, and said, "Lady, what future? I ain't got no future." And that's why I've spent 45 years, starting with the Poor People's Campaign, trying to answer that boy's question. We can get 50 or 100 of those children off the street from Harlem who don't have anything to do in the summer and who are suffering summer lumbering loss. And we middle class and affluent parents send our kids to all kind of camps and enrichment things. Let's have a freedom school at Riverside. We have 205 freedom schools around the country, and they're being taught by young Black and Latino young people. A third of them males, and I'm so proud of them. They come and they work 15 hours a day at Haley Farm, and they are beginning to transform the lives of children, and they're becoming role models, because it's hard to be what you can't see. And these children from these communities are making a difference, and about a third of them are in churches of all faiths. And we have our first 3 Jewish freedom schools, one in Charlotte and one in Los Angeles. And we've got some here. We don't have as many in New York as we ought to have. I want freedom schools everywhere to empower children, to engage parents, and to teach them how to learn to love reading. I want them to understand the mechanics, but I want them to learn their history. They know about Ella Baker. They know about what the Birmingham children do. And if you don't know your history, folk, you're going to repeat that history. And I don't want our next generation to grow up with historical amnesia. And so it's a wonderfully exciting program, and I hope you'll go to our website, look at it, and see how we can begin. And there are a couple of churches in New York that do it. I'm particularly eager about what we're doing in juvenile detention facilities. And I'm sorry to regress before I pray and sit down. But we've got to break the tie between, if we get the early childhood system in place, and if we can stop the tie between zero tolerance school discipline policies in the juvenile justice system by educating children and by telling people to stop putting children out of school at 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and for truants and tardiness. If they're not coming to school, find out why they're not coming to school. And so let's break that tie between schools and juvenile justice. But we have 14 freedom schools and secure juvenile detention facilities. A lot of resistance, took a long time to have it come. But you know what? If you treat children and young people like human beings and with love and respect, they'll respond that way. And we have been having enormous success in juvenile detention facilities, and we're trying to begin to spread them everywhere. If we can break the tie between the juvenile justice system and the adult criminal system and redirect children back into communities, and perhaps with freedom schools as re-entry devices, rather than sending them back to the same neighborhoods, the same gangs, the same pressures, give them an alternative. So I really want to talk to you about freedom schools. I also want to talk to you about celebrating children who are beating the odds, and we do it in 6 or 8 cities. We're going to do it in next March in New York, as we do every year. But, give a scholarship for a child, $10,000 a year. They can do it in 4 years, take the $2,500. They need books, they need travel, they need clothes, they need everything. But I am just always humbled by the resiliency and the courage of children who've lived through homelessness and hunger and violence and somehow are still able to keep moving forward. And it just takes one counselor in the school or one grandma or one neighbor who sees them and reaches out. And the youth who have come through our Beat the Odds program over the last 20 years are the pick of the leadership pool. They're now doctors and lawyers and Peace Corps volunteers. Again, children respond to adult love and adult caring and high expectations. And so I hope you will look at the website again and look at that program and see how you can name a Beat the Odds scholarship for your mother, your HBCU, your favorite college, for your favorite mentor. But let's reach out. We can save our children if we just do so. The prayer is now coming. O God of the children of Afghanistan and Pakistan and Gaza and Syria, and Nigeria, and Sierra Leone, and Liberia. Help us to love and respect and protect them all and reach out in every way possible as they face the crises of war and Ebola. For children, God, of the children of Israel, in Iraq, in Iran, and Jerusalem and Jericho, of South Africa, South Carolina, Southside Chicago, and Sandy Hook in Harlem. Help us to love and respect and protect them all. O God of black, brown, and white children and children of every hue, of children who are rich and poor and in between, of children who speak English and Hmong and Russian and Spanish and Chinese and Arabic and languages our ears cannot discern. Help us on this Children's Sabbath to recommit to helping and loving and respecting them all. O God of the child prodigy and the child prostitute, of children of rapture and children of rape, of runaway and thrown away children without parent or place, friend or future, help us to commit to loving and respecting and acting now to protect them all. O God of children of destiny and despair, of children who are healthy and children in pain, of children who ridicule, torment, and taunt, help us to love and respect and protect them all. And O God of children of peace and children of war, and those who suffer relentless gun violence in their communities, homes, and schools, of children without hope and children with hope to spare, of children who are loved and children who are unloved. They are all of our children. Help us to love and respect and protect them all. Amen.